Hey guys, this is Afro, back again with another monologue. For today's episode, I thought I'd talk about a subject that a friend of mine suggested way back. A subject that's been talked about a lot on YouTube, but still from my own personal view and perspective. That being Cartoon Network and their status today. But first, I'll talk about my history with the channel. While I remember being more of a Nickelodeon kid growing up, Cartoon Network was still one of my favorite channels to watch as a kid, especially since it was, and is still home to some of my favorite cartoons of all time. The shows of theirs I watched a lot back then include Dexter's Lab, Cow and Chicken, The Powerpuff Girls, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Camp Lazlo, and my personal favorite of them all, Ed, Edd n Eddy. But I've also came around to some of their more modern shows as well, like Steven Universe, We Bare Bears, Over the Garden Wall, and the most recent of them for me, OKKO. While I've never had much interest in Adventure Time, I can at least acknowledge the impact it left on the channel, and it did pave the way for the shows that I do like. And while I've only seen a handful of both Gumball and regular show, what I've seen from them is solid. So, by looking at that, Cartoon Network seems to have a pretty good track record with cartoons. Whether or not you like some or even all these shows, you can't deny that they've left large impacts and garnered huge fan bases. And if you combine all these shows together, they make up for what many people are calling a new golden age for the channel, even being as well regarded as the original cartoons. So with all that said, Cartoon Network should be doing pretty good for themselves, right? Well, not unless you ask the majority of the cartoon community. Yes, even with my praises, many cartoon fans have been going on and on about how Cartoon Network is having a downward spiral yet again. How they're losing their touch and are even quote-unquote doomed. As for me, would I say these remarks are valid? Is Cartoon Network really in a tough spot right now? Well, personally, I think these people are exaggerating a bit, but for the sake of it, let's take a look at the problems of Cartoon Network. As far as I'm concerned, most of people's grievances with the network mostly revolves around two aspects: the reboots and their scheduling. To start, let's look at their reboots, starting with a show that will make many people roll their eyes: Teen Titans Go! Now, I am aware that this is a show that's been ranted and bashed to death already. And yes, some people have taken their hatred for it too far. But for the sake of it, let me give my opinion in a very casual way. But first, I feel I should express my thoughts on the original Teen Titans. I do remember watching the show as a kid, just not religiously. Keep in mind, I wasn't really too big on superhero shows as a kid. But what I remember of it was a pretty solid show. Not perfect, but still good. As for Teen Titans Go, I kinda understand the showrunner's intentions. They wanted to take the franchise in a different direction, by giving it a more lighthearted comedic tone. Really, it's not like that was ever a bad idea in concept, but in execution, was this really the best that they could come up with? Was this really the best style, tone, and character designs that they could have gone with? Because I recall there was another reboot pitch called The New Teen Titans, and if that was the show CN chose instead of Go, I think fans would have been far more accepting to it. They would have been like, okay, it's not the original show, but at least it has the feel and spirit of the original. Unlike Teen Titans Go, where, based off what I've seen, it's just really obnoxious, juvenile, and even somewhat cynical at points. People have already talked about the episodes that seem to troll the detractors of the reboot, but all I can think about is the interview with Aaron Horvath and Michael Gillette, what seems to be them responding to the backlash of the show, which could be seen in SaberSpark's What's Ruining Teen Titans. I don't know if that's handling the backlash well, or just plain apathy. Like, they know they're making a dumb show, they know many people don't like that dumb show, and they don't care. but then again, the Teen Titans Go haters have really proved themselves with their death threats and getting too angry over, let's be honest here, something very trivial. But we gotta keep in mind, this wasn't technically made by Cartoon Network, but rather by fellow Warner Media branches, which could still make it a first-party title, but still. But then we have a reboot that was actually made by them, which is the Powerpuff Girls 2016. It really says something when some have made the argument that it's actually worse than Teen Titans Go. And really, the red flags were there before and after its release. Not getting Craig McCracken back, not having the original voice actresses of the girls to reprise their roles, when they were open to it, mind you, stupid censorship with removing Miss Bellum and Miss Keen's breasts, animation mistakes you'd expect from a bunch of amateurs and not a professional team, that creepy self-insert Jared character and his crush on Blossom, the addition of Teal who looks like a DeviantArt OC and is just a watered-down version of Bunny, and of course, having that crossover with Teen Titans Go. A crossover that would make Dawn of Justice look like Civil War. Safe to say, it was a giant hot mess. But most of all, did anyone really ask for another Powerpuff Girls reboot, given all the past failed attempts to reboot the franchise? 'Cause I sure didn't. There's also the current Ben 10 reboot. Granted, I've only seen a bit of Ben 10, but I'm honestly surprised that franchise is still going. But man, does the art style look like a huge downgrade. Plus, I've heard bad things about it, so make of that what you will. But of course, there's also Thundercats Roar, which has yet to be released, but people have already decided that they hate it due to quote-unquote ruining their childhoods again and having that Cal art style. Yeah, I'll get into that later. So yeah, based on that, Cartoon Network has perhaps the worst track record with reboots, and Disney and Nick are kicking their butts in that field. But again, that's just their reboots. They still have a good grasp at good quality original content. I've already listed the most popular titles from 2010 and beyond, but there's also the most recent cartoons, as well as the ones that have yet to be released that have a lot of hype to them. Plus the fact that they're created by people who seem to have ideas and tons of passion behind them, all coupled with a mostly good relationship with the network people. But with that said, they in some ways aren't given the proper commitment that they should be getting, which leads to my next grievance, their scheduling. For a while, the scheduling seemed to be a giant joke, by just filling all the time slots with Teen Titans Go 24/7. Which seemed to alienate its audiences that weren't the kids who liked the show. Some could argue they did it because it's popular, but it honestly feels like they were desperately trying to make people watch the show. And that seemed to really affect what was meant to be a big celebration for them, being their 25th anniversary, where they just made that kick-ass anniversary bumper, and that's it. They could have aired their older shows for just a month and had people vote which episodes they would air, giving this generation an idea what their old shows were like. But nope, they just marathon Teen Titans Go like there was nothing to celebrate. Not much of a celebration now, is it? And this isn't something they can't go back and improve, because it's already passed. And before you say that this is dated information, it makes me feel a little better seeing their scheduling now has some improvements. Okay, Teen Titans Go still takes up the majority of the time slots, but it doesn't seem quite as much as before, and they are giving the other shows more room to shine, especially the newer ones. Compare that to when regular show was ending and when OKKO was still new, where they put most of their attention to, once again, Teen Titans Go. Heck, I was expecting them to marathon the crap out of that show in preparation for the recent movie, but they only seem to have done that with just the opening weekend. That shows restraint, honestly. But even with that, the ratings sadly don't seem to be as big as they hoped they would be, and there are still shows that seem to have very long droughts in between episodes and time slots. Steven Universe being the worst victim. as it's still only airing every once in a while with long hiatuses in between, which seems to play a big part in people losing a bit of interest with the show. Not that it could be the show itself and its fair share of problems, but the sparse scheduling doesn't really help. There are other aspects to this, but again, I'll get to them later. So with all that said, I guess I can see how Cartoon Network these days isn't as perfect as I thought it was. However, while I feel the complaints and concerns that people make are understandable, I still think they're kind of overblowing it a bit. Especially when they're getting angry and hostile over the most trivial things, like that whole CalArt style controversy. Look, I understand not liking the style, as well as getting sick of seeing it everywhere. But my god, it's just an art style. It's really not worth getting this angry over. It's also ridiculous how CalArts is being treated like the scapegoat to this, considering some of the creators in question didn't even attend the damn college. And sending them shooting threats over a damn art style? What the hell is wrong with you people? Criticize it all you want, but leave CalArts out of it. It really goes back to that old saying being, it's just a cartoon. These shows really aren't worth getting this riled up over. But then they make statements that are, while mostly harmless, are still quite questionable. Like saying that the Miller era is worse than the Snyder era. Now, I'll admit that was a pretty bold statement for Mr. Renner to make, but the more I thought of it, the more I began to disagree. Yes, the Snyder era may have had more variety to their programming, but it was mostly with programs that just didn't belong on the channel. You guys know what I'm talking about. I'm not breaking anyone's hearts when I say that See It in Real was, and will always be remembered, as a stupid idea. The simple thought of seeing live action shows on Cartoon Network just didn't sound right one bit. And it'd be one thing if they were entertaining regardless, but they looked really corny, lame, and just tried way too hard to be like the competition. But one thing that baffles me is that there were some commentators who actually defended the block, back when BentheLooney was a major target to them. Now, I think Ben's a very questionable person as much as the next guy, but that's beside the point I'm about to make. Two commentators made the argument that what CN was doing was trying to add variety to the programming, basically widening their audience. Fair enough argument, I guess, except airing nothing but cartoons was the original foundation of the channel, and many of us loved it for that reason alone. But then there's another really dumb argument that two other commentators made, who argue that people actually asked for live action shows. If that's the case, why did people complain about it? Why would they ask for something that they would bitch and rant to no end about? It just doesn't make any sense. If you establish your channel on a niche, have it cater to that niche. Don't make shows that don't fit and miss the point of the entire channel. Which is something that modern CM does seem to grasp. Yeah, all the reboot cartoons may be bad to many people, but at least they're cartoons. At least they fit the network's proper dress code. Also, a lot of us tend to forget that Stuart Snyder was around during the channel's big comeback, as well as the revival of Toonami, so it's safe to say that he saw the error of his ways and tried to set things right before he left. In that sense, good on him. But some of the damage was already done. He couldn't get the likes of Craig McCracken, Maxwell Adams, and C.H. Greenblatt back, as they already moved on after being screwed over by them at the time. As for Christina Miller, I won't deny she may have responsibility with how the channel is run these days, but I don't think she should be the only one at fault, or even the one to blame for the scheduling issues. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to run a network. And the same could be said for the Snyder era. Heck, I can make the argument that Seema Zergami was a worse CEO than Miller. I mean, just hearing the stories and business decisions she made during her reign, It makes the Seer departure from Nick as a godsend. Also, at least the likes of Adventure Time, Regular Show, and Gumball had pretty good long runs, and shows like Steven Universe and We Bare Bears are getting renewed, compared to shows like Harvey Beaks and Welcome to the Lane, which got screwed over before they could really shine, because they weren't getting the same numbers as SpongeBob. So in many ways, I think Nickelodeon is still worse in those regards. But there's one thing we might want to keep in mind. Cartoon Network, and TV in general, are kind of in an awkward spot at the moment, as it's becoming less and less relevant thanks to the rise of streaming services, which could explain why the ratings, as well as the standards for them, have gotten lower over time. They seem to be trying to have it both ways with the Cartoon Network app, but again, one seems to be doing better than the other. And as someone who tried using the app, it was way too laggy for me, but that might be because of the model of my phone. Again, I'm starting to see how Cartoon Network still has these issues that hurt its image, but here's something that I think a lot of us should consider. Whenever a network, or studio, or gaming company reaches a pretty low point in their careers, they always have a chance to recover and improve. I mean, you could look at Disney. Their films began to struggle financially and for a while quality, and they became a joke with the direct-to-DVD sequels and the tween crap on Disney Channel. But with the help of John Lasseter and Ed Catmull, their line of quality became great again with their animated movies and TV shows, starting another renaissance. You can even include Pixar in there. They took a nosedive with Cars 2, and most of their films since then ranged from lukewarm or just below Pixar quality. But they've also released Inside Out, Finding Dory, Coco, and Incredibles 2, proving that they still have the magic to make not just modern-day classics, but good sequels as well. It could also be said for Nintendo. The Wii U was their biggest console flop since the Virtual Boy, but the Switch proved to be the comeback that they needed, not only surpassing its predecessor in less than a year, but it's also selling faster than the Wii, and it's on its way to surpassing the GameCube. These companies had their darkest hours, but they've managed to bounce back and regain most of our trust. Granted, there are other companies that are still screwing up and feel like lost causes, especially recently with Channel Awesome. But I just said that they have a chance. Whether they take it or not is another story altogether. And I'm not saying the examples I gave aren't without their recent flubs or hiccups, or even controversies, but the recent successes are proof they're in a much better state than they were previously. And the same could be said for Cartoon Network. Yes, stuff like the scheduling and reboots are concerning, but the good things keep them from being completely hopeless, and they seem to be showing some signs of improvement already. Like I said, the scheduling is a little better. They recently found success with Craig of the Creek and Summer Camp Island. They have even more coming in the future with Victor and Valentino, and the incredibly hyped Infinity Train, all of which should fill the voids of the older shows that have just or getting close to ending. Plus, from what I hear, the after credits of Teen Titans Go to the Movies tease the possible return of the original Teen Titans, which should make many of us happy. And who knows, maybe they'll have a reboot that will do whichever original justice. But if not, then just pray that the reboot craze will die out before they somehow get even worse. As for the direction I hope they could take within the new decade, well, at most I hope they'll be able to hold on to that line of quality programming that they currently have, but also try to add something new. Not repeat the past, but don't forget about its successes either. But what do you guys think? Do you think Cartoon Network's doing fine, or are you with those people who say otherwise? Personally, I think it's not perfect, but it still has good things going for them, and I'm confident that they can get back on their feet in the future. They've done it once, they can probably do it again. Only this time, the hole doesn't seem as deep as the previous one. This is Afro Otaku, and I'll catch you all later. Bye!